Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lindsay Smith. Thank you to everyone for hopping on so promptly. We're trying out a few new things tonight, and I think it might be working. Looks like everybody managed to hop on, or maybe John. Thank you for the welcome, John. Just didn't nap this evening. So, hey, but great to see everybody in the comments. Fantastic. Great to see you here every Monday night. It's a lot of fun. And I am slightly jealous that we're talking about some green grass poking through in Alberta. But I suppose that means that maybe there's a bit of moisture. There is no green grass in my neck of the woods. It is frigidly cold today, but it's going to warm up later. Okay, so this is the Agronomist. I think most people are pretty excited for tonight's episode. I know I am. Quickly, though, a quick reminder, do sign up for those CEU credits. If you collect them, go to realagriculture.com/agronomist tomorrow and let us know that you listened to the broadcast to collect your CEU credits. And quick shout out for next week, 8 p.m., our first April episode. Yes, almost April. We're going to talk wireworm next week from coast to coast. Okay, mostly not quite coast to coast. Sorry to Kevin. We don't actually mean BC, but from, Alberta to the East Coast. All right. And we do, of course, have our show sponsors to thank for tonight's episode as well. So thank you to Adama Canada, to Real Ag Radio, to Mind Your Farm Business. While other sources of innovation run dry, Adama is here to deliver, leveraging the world's largest library of actives to provide innovative crop protection solutions to your greatest challenges. We're all in on you. Talk to your Adama sales rep today or visit adama.com. All right. Without further ado, let's get to tonight's topic. This is going to be a popular one because, of course, it's super timely and everybody loves wheat. Yes. All right, let's bring in my guests. We've got Russ Barker and Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Welcome here, gents.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Hi, Pete.
It looks like I'm frozen. Oh no, there I moved. Yes, I moved. And Scott, there's no mute button tonight, baby. There is no mute button. Not only is there no mute button, but Lindsay admitted.
Look what I did.
What happened?
This is amazing. I did that. I didn't actually. We have no idea what happened. He'll come back in just a moment. Or maybe this is how I get my revenge for last week and him chirping me in the comments. There you are. Okay, Pete.
Unbelievable.
It's even better. It's even better than a mute button. I can just kick you off the show. It's amazing.
Oh gosh.
Alrighty. Now before, Hooray! Yes, the SmackDown button. Before we get going, Pete, you are wearing red plaid, and it's not for Cabot Cheese, though they also wear red plaid. Tell me about your play that's coming up, your dinner theater, whatever it may
Yep.
be.
It's not dinner theater this time. It's that at the Thistle Theater. So that's the town hall in Embro, and I have such a fun role. It's called Red Plaid Shirt. Anybody that's in the Embro area, either this weekend or next weekend, you need to come and see the show. It's a comedy. It's about retirement, so it's right up my alley, and I love my character. It is just, oh yeah, you got it. It is just a blast. Developing Fred. I'm Fred Baxter. I'm a retired accountant. Okay, I just retired and an accountant. So you can, I know nothing about numbers. I can see Russ just wanting to say, you know nothing about accounting, Johnson.
You are totally out of type.
Exactly.
There you go.
So not typecast at all, but community theater, Lindsay, is my comic relief, and it's been really good. We're back in person. We don't have any restrictions on the number of people we can have. We are asking people to mask when they come into the theater. That's pretty standard across all the different theaters right now. But beyond that, just show up, watch the show, laugh. You will laugh out loud. I hope you will laugh out loud and laugh lots.
All right. Okay. And be sure to heckle. Anyone who goes, please, anyone who goes, heckle for me. All right. Now, Russ, tell us about whereabouts in Ontario you are and a little bit about Better Crops by Barker.
Well, I currently live halfway between St. Mary's and Exeter, about a half hour north of London, Ontario. And I'm a Pioneer sales rep that sells seed, corn, soybeans, wheat, etc. with Pioneer Hybrid. My son and I farm together on several hundred acres, and the Better Crops by Barker, that's just a little fun thing that I've done for a number of years. It's a YouTube channel that is used to talk to our customers about agronomy issues, and we try to have a little bit of fun with it too, and bring my 3 grandsons in from time to time and show the rest of the world how smart they are.
All right. I like it. Everyone's going to have to
How
go
much
check it out.
Grandpa's taught them? How much Grandpa has taught them?
There you go. Yes.
Oh, no. I don't have to teach them very much.
So now, but tonight we are going to talk about assessing winter wheat, not just, of course, from the ground, but from the air. I do want to get a quick plug in, of course, Pete, you and Bern Tobin just put together a wheat school episode that just went up late last week. It's on realagriculture.com. It's on YouTube as well, talking about the economics, not just the agronomics. So tonight we'll focus on the agronomics, but I did want to put a quick plug in. So if you could just quickly, a little promo for that wheat school.
Yeah, so actually that wheat school and tonight are going to really complement each other super well, I think, Lindsay, just because we have other videos up on Real Agriculture in terms of the agronomics. And this will go up as well on the website. So there's lots of agronomics. The economics play so much differently this year because we have $12 wheat. I have growers talking about 15-cent a pound straw in the windrow. And meanwhile, we have people like me who were silly enough to forward contract some of this wheat crop at only $7.25 a bushel, which any year before this year was a heck of a price. And now at $12 wheat, I'm $5 out of the money. And you just go, wow, it really does. It changes the economics. Not only that, nitrogen's at $1.30 a pound. It looks like we're going to be able to get most of the nitrogen. That looks a little bit firmer now than it was, but regardless, it's incredibly expensive. So maybe being able to grow some nitrogen for the 2023 crop after the 2022 wheat crop comes off also plays into those economics. So many different factors this year from normal. It isn't the reason we'd like it to be this way, but it really is cool to force your brain to think it through.
Now, Russ, this whole discussion of the nitrogen factor for sure is a bit of a scary one. And we are going to talk about, yes, it's too early, all those sorts of things, but in sort of gauging that sense out on the landscape, are you hearing from neighbors and customers and these sorts of things about the worry about nitrogen this spring?
Oh, there's no question. It's one of those stresses that's in the at the back of everybody's mind. And Pete's, I mean, it keeps changing from day to day, if not hour to hour. And Yeah, I mean, Brian and I, we talked about it quite a bit already. We've got our plan in place, but it's
Mhm.
hard to know what everybody's plan is. And I just worry about our own plan. I'm not going to get too hung up on what other people are doing. It's too complicated.
Everybody take
It's a new
care of your own.
paradigm. It's a
Yeah,
new
take care
paradigm.
of
It's
your
like,
own.
oh, the old rules don't fit anymore.
Mm,
So yeah, this old guy is
yeah.
just trying to stay out of the way.
More as so Pete, is this where we start, we jump forward in the conversation and start chanting red clover, red clover, red clover. Clover,
Yeah, so
clover.
definitely one of those things, Lindsay, that we want to consider. I think that's 100% correct. And the problem, of course, is the stand of red clover. And so we are starting to look at planting clover or something after the wheat crop. Is it crimson clover? Is it berseem clover?
Mhm.
Berseem does most of its growth in the spring. The Harrow Research Station, Craig Drury at Harrow really thinks hairy vetch could work. And then Mike Kober says, oh my gosh, hairy vetch is so hard to kill. Peter, don't tell people to grow hairy vetch. So it just, we can grow red clover. I think we can seed red clover after the wheat crop comes off and still make a lot of nitrogen, particularly in the southern part of the area. And particularly if we continue to get warmer seasons, which means that we move that wheat harvest a little bit earlier, though a few days makes a huge difference in terms of seeding red clover. So absolutely, red clover is one of those things growers need to consider. And then you say, well, we're talking about assessing wheat stands. If the wheat stand is thin, the red clover can cause issues at harvest. So there's many of those things that we need to discuss for sure.
Which we will. Doug McComb chimes in. They're not giving clover away though either. So it is true. Just about everything is a lot more money. I haven't seen anything yet that's cheaper than last year. I'll put it that way. If
Yeah, but
anybody
Doug,
can think of anything that is.
yeah, well, your smile is as cheap this year as last year, and that sheep that died today on you for not good reasons. It's pretty cheap.
It was
too.
yesterday, Pete.
Oh, yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
She died for stupid reasons. Anyway, as we were discussing, Pete, the only good reason for a sheep to die is so we can eat them. Okay. All right. So let's tee this up. Because let's get into some of this assessment. We'll talk about adding that red clover in there. Maybe it is something that's going to happen later. I just think, and Pete disappears. But that's okay. We're going to go to a clip. This is Jeremy Boychin out in Alberta about this time last year, assessing winter wheat stands, talking about looking at plants per square foot, plants per meter squared. It's okay, Pete. We're going to take a little break. You can get your internet to like chill out, do some yoga, and we'll keep you around. All right, let's producer Jay, let's run the clip of Jeremy Boychin.
We are here today to talk about winter wheat survivability. Do you want to talk a bit about what sorts of things producers should be looking out for at this time of the year?
For sure. So we are getting into spring timing, especially in southern Alberta. Things are starting to warm up. The soil's starting to warm up. So we want to be getting out there and seeing what our winter survivability of our winter wheat is looking like, which means going out, taking a walk in the field, not just driving by, but getting into the field and pulling out that measuring tape, pulling out your boot or whatever you have to measure, and getting an idea of how many of those plants are actually survive the winter. Depending on where you were, you had better or worse survivability. There's a lot of things that factor into winter survivability of winter wheat. We're talking about variety selection, how much residue and how much straw is on that soil to protect that winter wheat as it's coming through. So there's a lot of different factors, so it's important to get out to your own field and take a look.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those factors. What are you looking for when you're pulling those, when you're digging, you're looking at those roots?
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to walk to different parts of the field. You want to be picking good parts of the field where you think that survivability may have been a bit better, where you had more snow cover, where you have a little bit better soil, as well as those low areas. And you're digging up those plants, you're taking a look at that root system, you're taking a look at the area just above the seed and seeing what that color of that root system and what that stem looks like. You're looking for a nice white color. You know, some of those leaves at the top, they're going to have some burning to them, and that's all part of that winter survival and getting through the winter. You're going to have some of those leaves burning off, but you're really looking for a good strong root system and a good strong little bit of stem beneath the surface there, and you're going to be pulling those up and you're going to be counting them. So get an idea of how many plants per square foot or plants per meter squared you're dealing with. You know, typically in Alberta, we're aiming for a seeding rate of anywhere between 40 and 45 plants per square foot, or 400 to 450 seeds per meter squared. So when we talk about survivability of winter wheat, typically we're getting in the range of, when we look in the spring, in around 200 to 300 seeds or plants per meter squared that are surviving, or if you want to put that into plants per foot squared, 20 to 30 plants per foot squared. When you start getting below 15, below 10 plants per foot squared, that's when you start getting into that risk area of, is this worth keeping? Should I be taking it out or overseeding it, depending what your next option is?
So if you're looking at potentially reseeding, I know right now, I mean, we're about mid-March, so we probably should be just waiting a little bit, but at what point do you really have to look at reseeding?
So absolutely, Kara. I mean, we are very early in spring right now, so making a decision on your crop right now is going to be super early, especially for those producers who are even further north of Red Deer and even close to Edmonton. We really want to be waiting and making those decisions based on when you would normally want to seed a different crop into that field. So if you were typically seeding spring wheat into that field, you want to align that decision of, am I keeping this winter wheat crop based on the normal timeline that you would for spring wheat. But of course, if you're putting in spring wheat, then you have to worry about, is winter wheat going to be coming up? Can I be putting this into a feed market? But if you're doing something like a broadleaf, so like peas or fabas, then the herbicides you're going to be using in crop are going to help clean that up. But you're really looking at that timing of, when do I typically seed in this field for a spring crop, and looking to make that decision a little bit ahead of that, so you can properly align your next best option if you feel like that winter wheat isn't surviving.
Pete, you told me there would be absolutely no costume changes, and you lied through your teeth.
What's your name again?
Yeah, exactly. This is, what is it, Fred Baxter? This is Fred.
Yes, Fred
Yeah,
Baxter. Come
that's
on, I
Fred.
just
Fred
had to.
Baxter. Yeah, the accountant. Okay, the retired accountant. Okay. All right. So Ken asked, do the same rules apply for fall rye? So let's back up just a little bit, because now Jeremy Boychin's based in Alberta. So some of the things are different, but a lot of things are very similar. So let's just quickly recap when we are assessing our wheat stands, which we're going to do from the air, and we've got some great photos and footage and all sorts of cool maps that Russ put together. But Pete, what are we looking for that sort of like ideal window, or the, hey, it's not great, but we're still going to keep it window as far as plant counts?
Yeah, and so that's a great question, Lindsay. And Jay, if you could pull up that slide 3, I think that'll help us kind of focus in on that. And this is one of those areas where you kind of go, okay, so this is what the science says. And so I have 2 different charts there. The one on the left, that's Ontario data, Ridgetown College, Aaron Smith, way back in the late 80s. And you might say, well, that's old data, but it still pretty much applies. But you would look at that and say, wow, a full stand, by the way, and these are 7.5-inch rows. Both of these charts are 7.5-inch rows, and a full stand would be about 23 plants per foot of row in 7.5-inch rows. And that depends a little bit on planting date. So Lindsay, you know that we've talked lots about, and when we get later, we seed heavier. And so again, right away, these are relative numbers. But I want everybody to take the Aaron Smith data with a real grain of salt, because the way they did these trials is that they planted October the 4th and October the 10th in ideal conditions at Ridgetown. So in the ideal window, it's early planting. And in the spring, they had a perfect stand, and they went out and by hand, they pulled out plants. So the plants that were remaining were 100% healthy, and they were early planted, they were well tillered. So this is absolutely a best case scenario. And you know, you would say 7 plants per foot a row, that's a third of a stand or a little less, and we're still at 92% or 90% yield. Wow, that's pretty impressive. The Kentucky data, a little bit more of a range there, and they're not quite as positive, and that's probably due to the fact that those plants maybe weren't as advanced in the fall, or they were a little bit more cold injured, or a little bit more prone to heat stress in that area. But it gives you kind of the range. And typically, if you're out doing plant stand counts, I like to see 10 plants per foot a row on average. But you still have to look actually at stems per square foot or stems per foot of row, much more so than just plants. Because those plants that, if I have September wheat and they've got 5 tillers per plant and I have 10 plants, that's 50 stems. Like, I'm in great shape per square foot. If I have November the 11th planted wheat that's just emerging now, we have wheat that's still just emerging as we speak. Well, gosh, they have no tillers per plant. And so now all of a sudden, 10 plants per foot a row is probably not enough. So just as Jeremy talked about for Western Canada, there's a range in there, but it really is, it depends. When Ken asks, is it the same for rye? Well, typically with rye, we can live with a little bit lower seeding rate. What's really interesting, if Ken's talking hybrid rye, we seed at 50% of the seeding rate to begin with. We start off with lower seeding rates, which is kind of interesting. So you can live with a few less plants. But if you're talking common rye, I think it's just in exactly the same game or close to it as winter wheat. And winter barley is again, both rye and winter barley, we probably can live with a few less plants, particularly winter barley because it tillers so well. But man, you got to look at the health of the plant, not just the plants per foot a row. And Russ, then we get into the whole thing. How often is it actually a uniform stand? Like, how often does counting plants really make a difference? Because it's either 0 or it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I was sitting here thinking, well, yeah, this is all fine and cute. But anytime I've had to look at a wheat stand that you're wondering whether you should keep it, it isn't boiled down to nice, neat formulas and nice, neat little squares and spots that are easy to delineate. It becomes a mathematical gymnastic exercise to try to understand how much area is affected and how big an area is worth keeping, and then going back and trying to decide, okay, is the area that's worth keeping, that's going to be 120 bushel potential wheat. The area that's not worth keeping, well, it's somewhere between 0 and 70. But the areas, it's just, you can't really tell. At least I'm not good enough to be able to tell from plant stand count whether the wheat's worth keeping, because it goes from 0 to 100 and it's literally can be 3 feet apart.
Yeah.
So I use other methods.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So let's get into some of these tools, because I want to show some of these, and we also have some great agronomic questions that are coming in that I do want to get to in a moment. So please, everyone, keep them rolling. Maybe we'll answer some of them, maybe not. But Russ, maybe walk us through. We want to talk about using drones and using aerial imagery to try and get some of these answers, because you hit the nail on the head with the one point that I really want to talk about tonight, is trying to estimate not just how well the field did or how well most of the plants wintered or whatever, but trying to actually make that decision. Because let's face it, and I'm sorry, Peter, some of these wheat fields aren't going to make it, and they're going to get ripped up, and they're going to, or sprayed out. Please spray them out. And they're going to get put into something else potentially, but we have to make that call. So Russ, walk us through that process. What are we looking at? What are the tools that we have to make that assessment on how much of the field is okay, how much is great, how much is meh.
And maybe before, as Russ starts that, Jay could scroll through some of those slides that we sent in, those pictures at the last, just to give a sense, right?
Yeah, we want to start with a couple of examples of what fields looked like last fall, just to remind people that there were some pretty variable stands. They peaked from last going into the winter. Too much water in October was the biggest culprit. Lots of streaky wheat, lots of tire run wheat, lots of patches. Yep, that looked like that. So let's take those fields or fields like them and bring them forward to March. And going forward, what do we use? And I'll show you kind of what I do to get a grip on the effect. So if Jay, you just want to head into the first slide I sent you. Yeah, okay. This is a farm that my son rents, and it's a portion. What I did here, this is using drone and drone deployer software, and this is what we call a live map. In this field, go to the next slide, please, Jay. This is an elevation map, and you can see how the field actually has a bit of a bowl shape to it, and everything slopes down. It's a lovely piece of dirt. It's good ground. It yields well, and it's actually relatively flat, but all the water does roll down into that dark blue area, and that's where that picture was previously. It had a little bit of a dead spot in the middle, and that's from last fall. Too much water in October last fall. We know it's dead. We know it's probably not going to be there. And so I was out last week and flew this field with the drone and drone deploy. And let's flip to the next shot real quick. All right. On the left, this is kind of, we're a little bit out of order here, but what I've done here is I've got a comparison of drone deploy and of satellite using Sentinel Hub. But let's talk about this drone deploy for a second. That's the image of the field there on the left. And that area that's dead is that odd, deep, dark red blood spot that's in the bottom section of the field, kind of an odd shaped, weird shaped little blood spot. And there's no wheat there. We know that. I don't think it's going to come back. So it's easy to see. The rest of the field, don't get too worried about it. There's some differences, but let's focus just on that one spot. Pete was asking, what's the difference between drone versus satellite? And there probably is two main differences. First of all, we want to emphasize that this time of year, we're really a little bit too early to be making too many assumptions based on either drones or satellites. There just isn't enough green tissue there to get too shook up. But going forward over the next few weeks, we'll be able to focus on that a little bit more clearly. So satellites really struggle at this time of year just because there's not enough green tissue for them to work with. They're next to useless until you get into green up conditions that are going to occur in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But the difference between drones and satellites, drones, you have to physically plot the map in the software. You have to drive to the field. You got to fly the drone, and all that takes time. And to go and plot this field and fly it with the drone, and this farm's just down the road. Heck, it's no more than 3 minutes out of my gateway, but still, it'll take me the best part of a half hour to go to get it in the software, go fly it, bring it back. I've got to download some images and whatnot, so I'm going to burn up some time. I can sit at my desk, and in 10 minutes, I can have a satellite shot, a free satellite shot through a software system like Sentinel Hub that can bring me an image right here at my desk. It's a lot faster. And for you guys, if you're in Western Canada and looking at this thing, it's pretty simple to run something like Sentinel Hub. If I can do it, anybody can do it. They're basically Google Earth images that you put into a KMZ or KML file, and you dump them into Sentinel Hub. You pick dates for the satellite to kind of a week that maybe you want to search for images, and it'll plop you an image of the field in question. And that on the right, that orange image is from Sentinel Hub that was taken last week. And you can see in that dark, the coloration is different. The spectrum color is different. But that dark area on the satellite shot corresponds pretty well to the dark red area on the drone, both showing a similar condition. Okay, so let's move on. So there's some differences.
Yeah,
Drones.
so Russ, can I just jump? Russ, can I
Yeah.
jump in for 1 second?
Yeah.
Sorry, if you just back up, Jay, I just wanted to say, because I think it's really important. So John Sulik at University of Guelph is kind of helping with this, right, Russ? And
that's right.
And he's actually he's going to put up or develop some videos that will help you walk you through this process. And we have one that he did for Russ. And I think, Lindsay, we could probably put it in the post tomorrow, or a link to that in the post tomorrow, because I think that, in terms of using that technology, right, Russ, that little bit of instruction will really help growers. And so we want to be as helpful as we can with this technology to move that bar forward. And I think John is going to do some at the University of Guelph around precision agriculture, but this is an excellent example of how we can use that technology. Sorry, Russ, I just wanted to throw that in while we were on the satellites.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It also depends on what you're trying to find out, what you're trying to learn. I mean, I still don't think you can beat drones for precise detail type of measurements. Right. If you get looking at traffic patterns or misses in small areas in the field, it's hard to beat a drone. But drones are time consuming. And they break down and you crash them. You do all sorts of foolish things from time to time, and we won't get.
That's why you let the grandkids fly them. They won't. The grandkids won't crash them. The grandkids are better at you than at it, Russ. Right. They're just better.
So anyway, we got this red. Let's move on real quick. We'll show you what else we do with this type of information. Okay, I zeroed in, went a little bit closer to that red blob, let's just flip to the next one. I think that's probably the best thing to do. And what I can do is draw a polygon, because these dead areas are never nice, neat squares. They're always odd shapes. And so in drone deploy software, I can go in and actually draw a polygon, and it'll tell me exactly how big those areas are. In this case, it's not very big. We knew that. It's not rocket science. It was not quite 2 acres. But if you had a number of these dead spots scattered around, 50 acres and a bigger accumulation, it's not hard to soon come to a calculation of how many acres are actually physically dead. And that's certainly, for my limited economic brain, makes it a heck of a lot easier to multiply the zeros and add the ones and twos and try to come up at least with a a reasonable strategy, if you will, going forward, or one that makes sense to me anyway. Yeah. So that's
now. So this is, it's just under 2 acres, and the rest of the field, as you mentioned, and just it looks okay, right?
The field was planted September 20th. September 30th. I meant to say September 30th, and it's lovely. It's going to be fine. Yeah. Don't pay any attention to those odd other colors. That really isn't indicative of a whole lot that's going to affect the crop right now.
There's nothing to see here. So then, Pete, I'm going to put a pollinator mix in those 2 acres, and I'm going to feel good about myself. What do you say to that? Russ is laughing at me, so that's what I know.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. Go ahead, then I'll tell you what we're going to do.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Okay, Pete. Should I do that? And then Russ is going to tell you what he's going to do.
Well, so plant something, Lindsay. I mean, pollinator mix, the big challenge with pollinator mix is how tall is it going to get? Because Russ's nice polygon there, around the edges, it's going to be thin wheat, but there's going to be wheat there. And I'm going to want to combine it because it's $12 a bushel, and I don't want to give up any bushels. So the big challenge with pollinator mix is going to be, is the pollinator mix taller than the wheat? And does it cause me a problem at harvest? And so, even red clover, I would say use single cut clover or plant oats. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, plant something, but just be careful with pollinator mix or anything that grows tall, especially around the edges. And as much as Russ has drawn a nice polygon there and said it's all dead, in a lot of those fields, those wet spots, there's plants coming. And they're way late, and you're going like, how can this be? But there is there's dead spots. There's spots with zero plants, absolutely. But in a lot of those fields where we thought there was nothing coming, in between the tire runs now, you see some plants poking up, and you go, wow. So just be careful with what you choose to put in there, Lindsay.
All right, Russ, tell me what you're going to put in there.
Well, this is easy peasy stuff. There's actually a laneway that goes up. You can't quite tell where it is, but it goes right up kind of through the middle of that blob, and it gives us pretty easy access. And we've got a thing called the bush hog, and we're just going to let the foxtails and the barnyard grass and the ragweed grow up a bit, and then mow it down, and probably mow it a couple times, and that eliminates the problem. If whatever wheat you cut off, you're sure not going to worry about harvesting it. And we're going to use weeds as our cover crop and just mow it down.
And so, Russ, my only comment would be, if I have to drive through the wheat to get there, then it's not quite as
right.
Yeah,
but there's a laneway.
Do that. You don't really.
That's right.
You don't really
we have
tramp
access,
that much.
and that's the problem. But in that case, there's really easy access into it. And we're just going to chop it down.
Why do they put the laneway right in the low spot? That doesn't make good sense.
Right? Hey, you should come to my place. There's a barn in the low spot. Okay, Doug.
This farm is owned by true tree huggers, and there's laneways and things along the trees that are there for a very good purpose. And the reason my son gets to rent it is because he respects that situation.
All right. Walking the dog. Doug says, could you broadcast spring wheat into it? So Pete, this is another thing. Now, perhaps not this exact field, because we are looking at a pretty concentrated, small area of the field that probably didn't make it or won't make it or won't produce enough of a crop to be worth it. But we know that there are going to be other farmers that are going to be dealing with perhaps many more areas, or perhaps larger areas of the field, and some will choose to go in potentially with a spring cereal. So what do we have to consider if we're going to put spring wheat in some of these winter wheat dead spots?
Yeah, and actually, if you're going to do this, you wanted to look at that shot from last fall and get a sense of where to do it, and it works really well. And I would say absolutely it's an option. The big part, and now we're getting to the economics, Lindsay, because in order for wheat to go into the feed trade, wheat cannot be more than 10% the value of corn. So if corn's $8 today, for wheat to go into the feed trade, it really shouldn't be worth more than $8.80 a bushel. It's worth $12. So that where I put spring wheat into the winter wheat, I now have a blended wheat. The millers cannot use that. Do not try to deliver that to the mill. They will crucify you, so to speak. Okay, like they can't deal with it. It's feed. If you can find a feed market, I would say though to Doug, broadcasting is just not really very successful. And that's why we talk frost seed in this part of the world, and frost seed. And what's funny about thin spots of winter wheat, you can frost seed the whole field with spring wheat. Where the winter wheat is good, it will simply outcompete the spring wheat entirely. You won't even see it. Where the winter wheat is thin, the spring wheat comes. Where there's no winter wheat, it's a great crop, and then you can combine it all together. But it's feed wheat, and last year feed wheat was worth as much as milling wheat, and so that worked perfectly. This year you might have to be a little bit more careful. Broadcast though, it's not as successful as we would like to be. That's just the bottom line.
Just don't do it. Okay. And John says, no, that doesn't work. I've witnessed the failure that is interseeding spring wheat into poor winter wheat. So definitely we've heard some success stories of exactly as you explained, Pete, and some certainly where you just end up ruining everything. Now, great question from Brian. So for Russ, have you ever compared the size of poor areas calculated by a drone versus satellite? And would you have confidence in using satellite polygons when ground truth? So I guess that's the key second step to that. But what's your confidence level on that? Great question.
Well, the real quick, honest answer is I haven't used satellite enough at this point. to really give them a good answer. But it does depend. If you're talking about our topic at hand tonight, if you're talking about winter cereals, whether it's barley, whether it's winter barley, wheat, rye, I don't care, and trying to determine the health of your crop going into the replant type of season, satellites have a real tough time just having the detail to pick up the areas, I believe, that will help you make that decision. Going further into the growing season, looking at growth differentials, looking at nutrient deficiencies, looking at bigger things, I think satellites are a tremendous tool for other uses. They say they're a lot faster and you cover a lot more ground more efficiently, whether you use satellite imagery, whether the Sentinel, whether you use granular climate view, whatever your particular color of choice is from your satellite providers. I don't really care, but they're different. They are different. Very site specific, very specific detail work. I think is still a drone job from my point of view.
Yeah. It would be interesting. I think Lindsay, John Sulik may be in the audience, and he of course has had a lot more experience with satellites than either Russ or myself. And he might answer Brian's question in the chat as well, because I think he's had, well, he would have good sense of where that might shake out.
Yeah. Okay. He knows far more about satellites than I do.
And great to see him in the chat, and for sure we will be linking to that video, Pete, in the post that's at realagriculture.com/agronomists. It'll be up tomorrow. Quickly, I want to back up just a little bit. So I want to go back a little bit to assessing the stand. So we can, of course, look from the air. We still have to make sure, though, that what we're seeing are viable plants. And, Jeremy mentioned that sometimes, what you see that overwintered is green, it's going to turn brown, potentially. It's going to blow off. You need new growth. It's not the brown leaves you're counting, or the overwintered green leaves. But Jason Vogt wants to know, is it a waste of time to dig up plants and bring them in? Or is that time well worth it?
Yeah, so I think in Jason's case, out in Western Canada, where you would like to know a little bit earlier, and your window between winter thaw and the time you need to plant that spring wheat is way tighter than it is here in Ontario. So it's the end of March. We're not going to plant corn till at least the 15th or 20th of April. So we don't need to make that decision. We don't need that early warning. In Jason's area, if they've had a super cold winter and no snow cover, if I'm in southern Alberta right now and there was no snow and it hit -35 and I've got winter wheat, I need to know, because if it's not there, I want to do something with it, as fairly quickly. So in those situations, bringing it in and giving it 2 weeks and looking for that new white root growth right at the crown. If you see that, it's good. If you don't see that, it's not good. And if you can get a 2-week jump on knowing that in Western Canada, I think it's worthwhile. But Jason may disagree with me. He's out there. I'm not out there. That's just what makes sense to me. He's sitting here in Ontario.
So I'm going to guess Jason's most of the crops still under snow and or water right now. So Manitoba got a heck of a lot of snow. Yeah, and it's been very, very wet. So I don't know if there's anything to dig up yet. But that's great point, though, is it's the timing, right? It's how long you have to make your decision that might make that call. Now, Russ, this one I'll start with you. Warren Schneck. So Warren Schneckenberger asked, when doing stand counts, do you count plants that have heaved but still have a few roots in the soil? So how do you account for how those plants have wintered? If you're trying to assess do you count that plant? Do you come back and check? What do you do?
Yeah, you're asking me if I would count a heave plant?
Yeah.
No.
No way.
No.
Pete, what about you?
No.
So Russ clearly does not farm in Lambton County, because if they didn't count the heaved plants, they wouldn't have any plants.
Nothing. Depends. You don't have big clays. Okay. Anyway.
What's really interesting about heaved plants is, what is the weather in the spring, And does that heaved plant have a chance to generate new roots into damp soil at the soil surface and reattach itself? By the way, heaved plants always have less vigor. So you can have, and we have had, awesome looking September planted wheat in Lambton County with 5 tillers per plant, and you go into the winter thinking you just have the world by the tail. Yeah, come spring, one side will all be ripped off from the frost heave, and the other side is still in the ground and attached. And those fields, you know, unheaved fields will yield 120 bushels. Those frost heaved fields they're there, man, they're 80 or 90 bushels. So it really is a hit. I'm not sure I'd agree with Russ. I wouldn't count them at all, but you certainly have to look at them and discount them fairly significantly when you do those counts.
Yeah, the reason you hit the nail on the head, the reason I don't count them is we hardly ever see them, to be really honest. It's either there or it's not. Like a heaved one.
Yeah. Russ lives in Russ farms in this glorious, it's I don't know, it's the Mecca of Ontario. He doesn't ever have any problems. I need to move about 5 miles north and I would farm much better.
There you go. No, well, okay. So, I mean, not having to deal with it. So I'm just going to mention perhaps maybe Pete, Russ is a little less attached to the wheat crop. And so he makes a harder, faster culling decision because it's all business for Russ. He doesn't let the heart make the decision. He lets the head.
You know, the reality is he's just
Lindsay. The crop that's dearest to your heart, once you get to understand it, is wheat.
Oh,
it always shows you how much love you're giving it.
Right. Because it will tell you when you're not giving it.
It'll tell you how badly you're messing up.
That is
corn,
true.
soybeans. They're like the cat. They don't really care. They
don't care about
disappear and lay in the corner, and you never hear from them.
So now,
wheat's always talking to you. Wheat's always talking to you.
We have but this sort of does rub with, we've called corn the diva crop. So I guess now we're calling it
corn's
a cat.
princess.
Princess, right? Canola is a bit of a diva. Yeah. So, but it's also now a cat, and that that adds up. So I'm fine with that. Dave Hooker has a great point here because we're talking about assessments, but we are talking about assessments in light of the fact that crop prices are very good and input prices are very high. We have a lot of economic decisions to be making here. And so Dr. Dave Hooker says, when are we going to do the number crunching of gross revenue, grain and straw, plus the rotation effect on future corn and soy yields, and free $1.20 nitrogen for next year? And he's being somewhat cheeky, but the man has a point. How do you take all of this into consideration, remembering how important it is to keep that wheat in rotation because it will pay dividends later? Pete, I'll start with you.
Yeah, and so how many times have we gone over this? And Dave's just driving home the point. We get 5% more corn yield, okay? Roughly speaking, 5% more corn yield. And 2 years later, we get 11% more soybean yield. So if you're Russ Barker in that gorgeous Mecca of Ontario at 300 bushel corn, 5% is 15 bushels of corn, and 80 bushel soybeans, 11% is 9 bushels more soybeans. So you add those bushels to the bottom line of your wheat crop. I'm not sure what the straw price will be, Dave. I mean, good grief, it's going to be up this year. I think everybody's sort of in that game. Is it 5 cents a pound in the swath? Is it 7 cents a pound in the swath? Are you even willing to sell the straw? Because some growers won't. But that also comes into play. I talked to a grower today who got, if I recall right, he was getting $60 a bale and he got 11 bales per acre. So that's $660 an acre in straw. It's no wonder that the land rent prices are going through the roof. But when you're assessing those stands, all of that comes into play, absolutely. But if you look in those killed out spots and you have too many of those killed out spots, 0 plants is 0 yield, even with straw. And yes, we can get 75 pounds of nitrogen if we get that good red clover crop. And at $1.20 or $1.30 a pound, that's maybe another $100 in nitrogen. You factor all that in, but you still need plants there in order to make this year's crop. So we have to factor in the economics, but we also have to assess the stand.
And drones are fun, but time consuming. Russ, go ahead. Those are my take-home messages.
Yeah, we love wheat. Okay, that's the first thing. The last thing we really want to do is take out a stand of wheat. And the reason that we love wheat are some of the reasons that Pete alluded to. And in our local area here, we've got a lot of large livestock farms, a lot of dairies. And so there's always demand for straw. And the other thing that we really enjoy working with our local dairy neighbors is the fact that they'll take our straw, but then we get a bunch of manure back. And you put wheat, rotation, and manure, liquid manure, with the opportunity then to sow and establish a really strong cover crop. It won't be things like clovers, but we'll go in with cheap cereals like oats and have a vigorous fall cover crop that then can be cut off and returned back for silage, or you kill it and you work it down. You add up the grain, the straw. Even if you lose a quarter of it with winter kill, in my books, you still keep the wheat. At least we do around here. We'll still keep it because it's too much value to our rotation. There's too much good things you can do to, you got to fix some drainage. You got to do this and that on a farm. In August and September is prime time to look after some of those things. And you get the manure back, you get the cover crop in. I don't know how you can do it any better. So we really don't like to take out wheat unless we really have got, and I can only think of one instance that we've actually killed wheat and planted soybeans. Forget corn. We're not going to plant corn into it. We'll plant soybeans.
Okay. So what was it, totally dead, or what? It was that bad? What happened?
No, it was before I had drone capability, and it was probably 2/3. 2/3 okay, 1/3 gone. And that, but that was too much. It was bad. Okay. It looked ugly. It was awful.
Well, and what will the neighbors say? Okay, so now
hey, don't worry about them.
I never do. Okay, so Jason though Jason's based out of Manitoba. Winter cereals out on the prairies, they've certainly become more popular. They've dropped off in popularity. It depends on the area. Some people like them, some people don't. And so Jason wants to know, can either Peter or Russ comment on whether they know if there's any advancements coming in winter wheat genetics to overwinter better? So we certainly know in some areas of Ontario, we struggle to get winter wheat to really thrive after our winters, and the prairies, of course, have their own challenges, but struggle with the same. So, Pete, give us the good news. Tell us there's amazing new genetics on the way that are going to fix all of our overwintering problems.
There is amazing new genetics on the way. When we're going to get them is the question. So it's one of the issues, Jason, and everybody listening, like if you ask Russ how much Pioneer spends on corn genetics, breeding corn genetics, how much they spend on breeding soybean genetics, and then ask them how much they spend on wheat genetics. And there just isn't the same impetus put into wheat genetics because it's not a hybrid seed. People keep their own seed. There isn't a return to the breeding effort. And is there exciting new stuff? Absolutely. I mean, Rob Graff out of Lethbridge is working hard on it. But then you look at Syngenta, and they pulled out of breeding wheat. They were in breeding wheat. They pulled out of breeding wheat because there didn't look like there was a profitable operation there. And if you want better advancement, we need more dollars to go into breeding. And I mean, double haploidy. I listened today at the Great Lakes Wheat Workers. We had a couple of great presentations on speeding up that wheat breeding effort. And everybody's paying attention to that, and we can maybe cut 3 to 5 years off variety development. So are there exciting new advancements? Absolutely. And if the climate keeps warming, Jason, and you don't get the -40s, you only get -30, then that allows us to move forward faster. But when you have to get that hardiness to take, the North Star kind of hardiness where we need to be able to withstand air temperatures of -25, -30, it just takes so much effort to get good winter survival that we can't focus as much as we would like on the higher yield portion of that effort.
And to give the breeders a little bit of it's extremely difficult to breed for genetics that have that physiological tolerance to whatever condition you want to talk about. In this case, we're talking about wheat. But even if you get into severe drought tolerance on corn, sometimes it's very difficult to breed for very specific that are combinations that are physiologically but environmentally driven. And cold injury in wheat is something that is strongly environmental, and there's a bit of physiology to it. But to get to my point, it's hard to come up with genetics that will do both. That will give you great survivability coming out of the winter, but then be bang buster yields in the years where there is no winter kill. At least where we are here, we don't get winter kill enough that we can't get too worried about winter kill. So we look at genetics that really deliver yield and standability and disease tolerance, grain quality factors, and all these other things. But Pete hit the nail on the head. The return to breeding community with wheat is pretty small in comparison to the big three: canola, corn, beans.
Yeah. And John makes a comment about, wheat being grown all over the world, and it's true. And so, there's breeding efforts all over the world, but everyone is sort of focusing on the challenges of their geographic regions. And Canada, Western Canada especially is probably one of the harshest climates that winter wheat has to survive through. So although, we've got advancements in other geographies as well, they don't always translate to Canadian conditions necessarily. So it's not apples to apples necessarily. Now, Dr. Dave has a good point here, because of course, one of the challenges for many areas is the overwintering. So you've got exposed plants that have to deal with extreme cold. Maybe Pete will join us. He didn't even say anything mean to me, so I don't know why he left this time. But Dave mentions, though, that the major wheat stand issue in the fall in Southern Ontario was waterlogged conditions after planting. So that's a bit different, right? We're talking about planting conditions not being ideal, not necessarily winter conditions being super harsh to kill off some of these plants. And Russ, as you showed that map, that dead area, that's standing water that did that. That's not winter kill per se.
Yeah, but Dave brings an excellent point, and it's something that we're going to be following through here. We just haven't got far enough into this year to be able to assess it real well. But the real question is, what are those areas that he describes that were waterlogged last fall? How are they going to look once we get green up? What are they going to look like in the 1st of May? And it's just too early to know that. Those logged areas are going to have somewhat of an effect. They have to. However, every crop goes through its yield determining stage that tends to outweigh everything else. And with wheat, it's the weather in the last week in May through the first week in July. That 6-week period determines our wheat yields. We get rain, sunshine, lots of sunshine, a little bit of moisture, not too much moisture, and then we'll have big wheat yields. And it usually boils down to what we get at the time of year where it makes yield. The rest of the year doesn't really matter near as much.
So Pete, we're just thanks for joining us. I'm a little disappointed you're wearing the same hat. Yeah. So everyone makes fun of me for my crappy connection. At least mine, for the most part, lets me stay. I just get frozen and pixelated. But so we're talking about, of course, one of the biggest challenges for the Southern Ontario crop was the waterlogged conditions in the fall. And so maybe if you can, and we're running short on time here, but with how wet it was in the fall, was there a window that was the winner? Was it early? Was it late? Because sometimes if conditions were crappy in September, that's not the winning wheat. So was there a window last fall that looks the most promising?
So I'll still take the early wheat hands down. And yeah, it suffered a bit. And I mean, if Jay wants to pull up the that slide of Russ's of my farm, or even the picture further in of my farm, but those early plants that were over good drainage areas. Yeah, Jay, I think it was, yep, that's my farm. So just if you advance one more and you can just see what my wheat looked like.
Oh, that's mine.
Yeah.
Too. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, I think
We want at least one of Johnson's farm so that everybody can pick on it.
Well, that was.
Yeah, that was his, but.
Oh, wait. Hey, I'm
we're getting close. We're getting close.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're almost there, John.
He had tile run wheat. Didn't you, Pete?
Yeah, I think it is.
Absolutely.
Also,
so,
yeah,
back up
John,
to about slide 2, I think it is, Jay.
John, I'm starting to think that you're perhaps getting paid by Starlink. He's always got here we go. Farmer Johnson.
So I actually I used this in Dave Hooker's drainage class, and it's really amazing to me. But look at that tile run wheat, and this is planted on September the 20th, and I'll take that wheat over November wheat, even though the fact that it looks less than ideal. Now, there is on some of the really heavy soils, and by the way, tile run wheat, you get 14 inches of rain in October, and your tile coefficient is a half an inch. That means you remove a half an inch per day. And so guess what? Half an inch per day, that means 14 inches takes 28 days to get rid of that water. And so you can't get rid of it fast enough. And we get this tile run wheat. There's some other stuff going on in this particular wheat field. But right now, Russ, you flew this field. We saw those pictures. Yeah. I think that wheat field still has amazing yield potential, and I'll take it over November wheat any day of the week.
It's going to be fine. And you remember last fall, the big question was, what about all this yellow, orange looking wheat? I've never seen it like this before. And the wheat's going to die. It's getting worse. And I know you were saying, and I was, anytime anybody phoned me, I'd say, just stop looking at it. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Come back in the spring. And you go back to those same fields right now, and they, for the most part, are a much more uniform green as they're starting to come out. But it's just a little early to make too many statements. But I suspect that all those odd colors from last fall, we won't be able to, once the plants kick into gear and start putting out new leaves, we're not going to be able to tell them where they were before versus what they see now. So I'm not worried about
slide 1 there. Go to slide 1, Jay, because I just want to throw that up and just kind of, I want to poke a little fun at Dr. Dave as well, because here's Dr. Dave's wheat. And again, it's tile run wheat, and Dr. Dave actually had more rain than I did, but all that wheat is still there. And so I think that wheat still has really good potential. The question becomes, how do I manage it? In my field, I think the good wheat outweighs the poor wheat, so I'm probably going to manage it like a good wheat field. In Dr. Dave's case, if that's my wheat field, the poor wheat outweighs the good wheat, so now I'm going to manage it like a poor wheat field. And if I manage it like a poor wheat field, all those good strips are probably going to lodge flatter than, pea on a plate, and it's going to be a brute to combine. But those are the decisions I think you have to make in these early fields, and I'm happy to make those decisions as long as the stand is there.
Who has better GPS? Farmer Pete? Sorry, or Farmer Johnson or Dr. Dave Hooker?
John, no, that you're looking at my plots. You're looking at my plots, so we nudge those rabbit runs are so we can find them with the combine and combine 20-foot wide swaths with my 21.5-foot wide header. So it's you can laugh at me, John, but there's always a reason. There are no mistakes in agriculture, only test plots.
Only test plots. And your whole farm is test plots. So there we go. I like it. And I am looking forward to where this goes. Dr. Dave says this is his neighbors. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He didn't put the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I added that because maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You'll never know. But good fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this all does play out for this season. We did have one of our tried and true commenters, Warren Schneckenberger, sent in some photos as well. I don't know if we have those to share, but for Eastern Ontario, I don't even need to put that caveat on there, but it looks good. It looks really good, I think.
I wish my
mean,
wheat looked that good. Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
please
that's gorgeous.
please don't
Isn't
make fun of our
holy
snow that we still have. But look, that's pretty good.
yeah. Nice field
That's
worn.
really good.
Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
thumbs up.
Nicely tillered. Yeah. Yeehaw.
So this is, just so you guys know, this is Eastern Ontario. It's past Belleville. You have to keep going. It's further
Is there
than that.
agriculture? Does something
Yes.
exist past
I'm
past
showing you.
Toronto?
There's this field. It's
Nothing
just
exists past
Belleville.
Toronto, Lindsay.
No, of course not. I know. I live in the woods, apparently. All right. Okay, we are over time, which I'm not surprised at all. I think we probably need like a agronomist after dark for afterwards. But we will check in on how this all goes, of course, as the growing season goes on. We've got a couple weeks ahead of us that should give us, we hope, lots of green plants coming up and some good hope for the season ahead. So we'll be having more conversations, I'm sure, about how to manage this crop once we know what kind of growing season we have in front of us. But Russ, thank you so much for putting up with myself and Pete tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
if that's
Yes.
the toughest thing I've got to do today or tomorrow, life is okay.
You're doing okay. All right. All right. And Pete, thank you so much, of course, for joining us. And everybody head on over to realagriculture.com and look up that latest wheat school as well that Pete did with Burn Tobin. It's also a great one. So Pete, thank you. And only one costume change.
Yeah. Well, you didn't go to a second clip, so I didn't have a chance.
It's sort of my jam, I got to tell you. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thank you to everyone in the comments. Great to see you all there. Fantastic questions. Great discussion. I appreciate it. As always, tune in next week. We're going to talk wireworm in Western Canada, in Ontario, out east, everywhere, because it's a pest we love to hate. All right. And head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomist to collect your CEU credits. Big thank you to our show sponsor, Adama Canada, and Real Ag Radio and Mind Your Farm Business. And we shall see you next week. Cheers, everybody.